Today, we're unpacking a genuinely fascinating overlap between two worlds you probably wouldn't normally put together. We're going to look at how the cutting-edge discoveries of modern neuroscience actually align remarkably well with an ancient theological framework, and we're doing this to solve a massive problem we're all facing right now, the modern motivation crisis.
Let me ask you something. Why does doing absolutely nothing leave you feeling so exhausted? You know the feeling, right? Think about how you feel after an hour of just mindlessly scrolling on your phone on the couch. You haven't moved a muscle, you haven't exerted any physical energy, yet when you finally put the phone down, you feel completely drained, lethargic, and just unmotivated. It makes zero logical sense, well, at least until you look under the hood of your brain.
Part 1. The Modern Motivation Crisis and the Neuroscience of Craving.
Okay, to figure this out, we've got to look at the biology of why our brains feel so completely hijacked in the modern world. And that means we have to talk about dopamine. We hear dopamine called the pleasure molecule all the time in pop culture. But neuroscience shows us a very different picture. It's actually the chemical of motivation and craving. It's the core biological driver that pushes us to seek rewards, to put in effort, and to pursue our goals. Essentially, it's what makes you want to get up and actually do something. Here's the catch, though. Modern technology, social media algorithms, junk food, they completely hijack this natural evolutionary system. They flood our biological systems with massive instantaneous spikes of what neuroscientists call cheap dopamine. You're getting the chemical reward without having to put in any of the actual effort that your brain evolved to expect. It's a complete trap. When we constantly go for that cheap dopamine, which again gives us instant hits for zero effort, our brain just gets overwhelmed. To protect itself from this unnatural flood of chemicals, the brain compensates by actually dropping its baseline dopamine levels. Now, contrast this with natural rewards. Those require high effort, they delay our gratification, but they lead to lasting joy without wrecking your brain's chemical balance.
Because you've flooded the system with cheap hits, that unnatural drop in your baseline leads to a massive dopamine crash. This right here is exactly why you feel so exhausted after scrolling. It results in deep feelings of laziness, intense brain fog, and a complete lack of motivation for normal, everyday tasks. Your brain has essentially become numb to healthy rewards because it's so used to those cheap, extreme spikes.
So what's the fix? Well, the crucial point modern neuroscientists make is that we need a dopamine detox. This is a hard biological reset where you intentionally restrict highly stimulating activities. By actively delaying gratification, you reset the brain's reward receptors. You are quite literally training your brain to find joy in hard work, focus, and long-term goals once again. Restrict, reset, and retrain.
Part 2. Mastering the Lower Self and Ancient Wisdom from Modern Brains.
Now this is where it gets absolutely wild. Over a millennium ago, Islamic theology systematized this exact neurobiological struggle just using a different vocabulary. Think about the parallels here. Modern science talks about the struggle between instant gratification and long-term goals, which is driven by the primal brain. Islamic theology maps this directly to the tension between dunya, those fleeting worldly illusions, and akhirah, the ultimate long-term goal of the hereafter, which is driven by something called the nafs. In this theological framework, that primal drive for instant gratification, the exact same part of your brain begging for cheap dopamine, is categorized as the nafs. It represents the lower self, or the ego. And the texts teach that true mental and spiritual peace only comes from actively disciplining this nafs and resisting those fleeting worldly illusions. The Qur'an frames this beautifully in Surah An-Nazi'at. It directly addresses the absolute necessity of controlling these urges. It talks about preventing the soul, or the nafs, from its unlawful inclinations. It's essentially an ancient call to willfully deny instant gratification in order to achieve an ultimate refuge or reward. And you can see our modern dopamine flaw perfectly described in Surah Al-A'la. It highlights how we naturally default to choosing those cheap, temporary rewards, what it calls the worldly life, over what the theology describes as a better and more enduring long-term success. It hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? Then there's this verse from Surah Al-Kahf that really brings the concept home. It argues that enduring good deeds, which, if you think about it, represent the ultimate delayed gratification, are far better for our lasting hope than the temporary, shiny objects of the modern world. It's all about trading those cheap hits for enduring value.
Part 3. The Ultimate Dopamine Reset and Prophetic Protocols.
So, having established this incredibly parallel framework, how exactly did they do a dopamine detox back then? Well,
If we look at the source material, the traditions of the Prophet Muhammad serve as highly structured daily protocols for resetting the brain's reward system. We're talking about distinct, disciplined practices, waking up before dawn for the Fajr prayer, actively lowering the gaze to restrict visual stimulation, and regular fasting. All of these demand intense daily impulse control.
To really grasp the mindset required to maintain this level of discipline, take a look at this authentic hadith. It frames the world as a prison house for a believer. Now, in context, a prison is a place where your desires are restricted. So this teaches that a believer is meant to willfully restrict their immediate, cheap desires in this world so they can achieve that ultimate delayed gratification later. But perhaps the most powerful tool in this entire framework is Psalm, or fasting. Described here as a shield, fasting acts as the ultimate dopamine fast. Think about it for a second. It trains the brain to deny even basic survival needs like food and water for hours on end. If you can build the willpower to control your biological need for food, you are building massive, undeniable willpower over the Nafs and all those other cheap distractions.
Ultimately, this whole theological worldview is summed up perfectly in this hadith. It teaches that the path to ruin is literally paved with easy instant gratification. It is veiled in desires. Meanwhile, ultimate success, or paradise, requires pushing through resistance, effort, and hardship. It's a total reframing of how we should view difficult tasks.
As we wrap up this explainer, we've seen how modern science and ancient theology point to the exact same truth about human motivation. So I want to leave you with one final profound question to think about the very next time you feel that urge to reach for your phone for a quick hit of cheap dopamine. Ask yourself honestly, are you mastering your desires or are they mastering you?